Hey everybody and good evening. My name is Derek. Tonight I want to talk about September 11th, particularly the attacks that occurred in the year 2001. So this live stream might seem a little bit discoordinated, if you will, not quite as organized as most of my work, but I do want to get this information out there. So for anyone who wants to stick around and is willing to learn, there should be some good information in here. We're going to talk about basically the numerology of the 9/11 attacks, but also how it ties into the esoteric knowledge about solar eclipses, and also a little bit about the tarot. Also, I'm going to be trying to keep an eye on the chat. Now, YouTube, for some reason, I can't get into my creator studio, so my chat window, it's not working perfectly, but like I said, I'll try and keep an eye on it while I'm on here. I'm going to have it in the corner of my screen. And I just want to talk about why I have this belief that September 11th was the ultimate solar eclipse ritual, and why I continue to think that the dates on which solar eclipses occur seem to be the most significant to the occult, and why they always script it around that. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Solar eclipses are the ultimate moment of time. Me personally, I saw last year's total solar eclipse that went across the United States, and absolutely the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I mean, without a doubt. And it makes sense that this would be the event that's attributed by the occult, that understands the mathematics of the sun, the earth, the moon, and the solar system, and what makes this all possible in the first place. So one thing I pointed out in my video was how there were total solar eclipses on the dates September 11th in 1988. You'll see there was an annular eclipse, the only one of the year, to occur September 11th, 1988. This was exactly 13 years to the day before the 9/11 attacks. With the Jewish ordinal cipher, this is Jewish Gematria dropped down to an ordinal base. Remember, this is the cipher where Tisha B'Av, the holiday that commemorates the destruction of the two temples on the Jewish calendar, sums to 9/11. Tisha B'Av celebrated on the 9th day of the 11th month of the civil calendar. The 9th day of the 11th month on the Gregorian calendar is November 9th. This 1109 number shows up here, just like how the date is written. This number attributed in both the Hebrew and Gregorian calendars in Gematria. So not only did we have an eclipse on that date, but one Metonic cycle later, exactly 19 years, this would be in the date 2007, September 11th, there was a partial eclipse on 9/11, 2007. So this one occurred 6 years to the day after the 9/11 attacks. So when we look at the number, well, first, the number 13. 13 is the sixth prime number, and the 9/11 attacks were exactly 13 years after one eclipse and exactly 6 years before another. In Jewish ordinal, total eclipse equals 130. Now in numerology, these zeros in the result are ignored, so we drop this and it becomes a 13. Now in this same cipher, Freemasonry has a value of 130, and it's Freemasonry that was established by the numbers of total solar eclipses. I believe the word government equals 130 in this cipher as well. And of course, Freemasonry, a humongous component of the government with its headquarters, the 33rd degree, in Washington, D.C. So like I said, I'm going to keep my eyes on the chat and look at questions. I'm not going to stray too much from this topic, though. If you guys got something about 9/11 or eclipses, I'll take a glance. But I'm going to try and stay focused here because I got a lot of material to cover as it is. So Freemasonry was founded by the numbers of a total solar eclipse. Now, on June 24th, 1717 was the date. Using the reverse alphabetic order, solar eclipse equals 190. This is the date that leaves 190 days in the year. Think about how the sun and the moon are the two largest observable circles in the sky. And you see it, in fact, in these tarot cards, portrayed each as a giant circle in the sky. You have the moon, the 18th card, the big circle, and then you got the sun, the other big circle in the sky that we can look at. Well, we can't really look at the sun for too long. I wouldn't advise you to go out and do that. But the concept of the circle is so significant in the mathematics of the circle. We know that this crafts our language. Now, in Hebrew Gematria, the phrase for full moon has a value of 289. And 289 is 17 times 17. It's got that square root. Here you see it in the factorization, 17 squared. And Freemasonry, the modern version anyway, was founded in the year 1717. So speaking of Hebrew Gematria, let's take a look at the value for the word circle. Oops. So the word circle in Hebrew Gematria sums to 143. And then in English, using the reverse alphabetic order, it sums to 112. The date that Freemasonry was founded fell exactly 112 weeks after a total solar eclipse that was visible in London, England, where Freemasonry was founded. Also, it was 14 months and 3 days after the most recent total solar eclipse that occurred elsewhere in the world, that one lining up with the Hebrew Gematria of circle. So not only was the date that they were established very significant, but the Grand Lodge of England technically went extinct on December 27th, 1813. Of course, using the alphabetic order, Freemason equals 96. And if you measure from the date that they were established to the date that it went extinct, it was a little over 96 years. Also, don't overlook this 186. The 186th prime number is 1109. Another number with that 119 sequence. So this date, December 27th, 1813, was 202 days before the next total solar eclipse. Using the alphabetic order, total solar eclipse equals 202. Now, this is similar to the number 220, which is like the number 22. Master builder number equals 220. In the reverse order, London, England, where Freemasonry was founded, equals 220. But that's not it, right? So 3 years later, there was a total solar eclipse on the date 11/9. And measuring from the date they closed to the date of that eclipse was 202 weeks, just like total solar eclipse once again. This date also happened to fall 220 weeks after a total solar eclipse, and then 22 weeks and 0 days after another. So go ahead and do the measurements yourself. Just the eclipses around 1813 in the surrounding years. And again, I'm only measuring to total solar eclipses. And just to give you an idea of how rare the total solar eclipse is, here's a little calendar I put together to give you a visual of how many of these eclipses actually occur in any given decade. So let's start here in the 70s, for instance. Notice we have 7 total solar eclipses. These are the black circles. These other solar eclipses with the circle. This is an annular eclipse. This is where the sky does not turn completely dark because the moon is too far away from the Earth and is thus not large enough to cover the sun. And you'll see in the 70s there were 7 annular eclipses as well, so 7 total and 7 annular. And then you also have a few partial eclipses. 3 of them occurred in 71, 2 in 75, and 2 in 78. And then you get to the 80s, and notice how in back-to-back months you had 2 hybrid solar eclipses, both annular and total. That's where the moon, during the eclipse, the moon gets close enough to the Earth to cause a total eclipse. But again, in this decade, there's only 6 total eclipses. So these are rare events. Notice how in the 1990s, actually the year 2000, there were 4 partial eclipses in 1 year. A lot of partial eclipses in this decade, in fact. So let's talk about the word eclipse and why it has the gematria value in Hebrew that it does. Oops. Bumping the microphone here. Sorry about that. So let's go to Google Translate, type in the word eclipse. Now you actually get a phrase that is closer to solar eclipse. However, this word alone, if you switch this around, or was it the other? Let's see. Yeah, it's just the word eclipse. This word alone is eclipse. And in Hebrew Gematria, we have a value of 156. Now, this number is attributed in English as well. The word eclipse has a Gematria value of 33 in reduction. And then when you write out 33, it sums to 156. And why is the number 156 significant for eclipses? And I'll show you right here. So what it has to do is it has to do with the number of synodic months that occur between each solar eclipse. Now, a synodic month, otherwise known as a lunar phase, is roughly 29.5 days, just a little bit more than that. And if you measure the number of days between solar eclipses, this same idea also works with lunar eclipses. You can do the same thing if you go to the lunar eclipse database, and you'll find the same patterns. There has to be either 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases between each eclipse. So let's show you how this works. Starting with the year 2010, we had a solar eclipse on the date January 15th, an annular eclipse. The next eclipse was a total eclipse on July 11th of the same year. And notice how this is 177 days. Well, 177 days, if we divide this by the length of a lunar phase, we get just almost exactly 6. So this tells us it was 6 lunar phases between eclipses. The next eclipse after that was a partial eclipse on January 4th, 2011. Again, 177 days or 6 lunar phases. After that, we get an eclipse on June 1st, 2011. This one's 148 days. 148 divided by the length of a lunar phase is just over 5. So we see that was 5 lunar phases between eclipses. But now, from June 1st, we get a partial eclipse, then we get another partial eclipse 30 days later. So 29 and a half, you can see how this becomes 30. So this is only 1 lunar phase after the last eclipse. And then this cycle continues. If you go from July 1st, 2011 to the next eclipse, November 25th of the same year, again, you get roughly 5 lunar phases. So that's why the word eclipse in Hebrew sums to 156. It's got to be 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases apart. So I think I've made my point clear on that. Now, let's talk about this in relation to the 9/11 attacks. The story of Al-Qaeda, the bin Laden operation, funded by the Saudis and Americans, and we know that this is just a rich, wealthy, elitist class of people that operates on a different level than us, and the last thing we're going to get from the standard media outlets is the stone cold truth, right? So if you do the research, multiple sources say that work of Al-Qaeda commenced following a meeting on September 10th, 1988. September 10th, the day before 9/11. I don't know, would it be too obvious if it was right on the date? But how about the fact that it was 1988, this being a massive sun and moon number? Think about the paths of the sun and the moon in the sky. If you photograph them at the same time each day, they make a figure 8. And this number 88 so important. And not only that, of course, but remember, the only annular solar eclipse of 1988 occurred on September 11th. So if you measure from September 11th of 1988 to the date of the 9/11 attacks at New York and the Pentagon, well, look at that. It's exactly 156 months. And isn't it interesting that the biggest false flag of all time falls so perfectly in line with Eclipse, right? Eclipse 33, false flag 33. What about Jewish Gematria? In Jewish Gematria, false flag equals 156, just like the eclipse. Is it possible, truth seeker, that our entire language was coded around this ritual, the destruction of the two towers? We know that Freemasonry was established around the time that, English became or came into its current form. Granted, English was a language for many years prior to that, but it took a while to finalize the alphabet and our vocabulary and what's all accepted in our dictionary. These are all Masonic institutions. And sorry, guys, if I'm not keeping up with the chat. I'm kind of in a flow here, and I just enjoy sharing this information because it blows my mind so much, right? So let's talk a little bit about the tarot real quick before we go on, right? And for those of you who may not know, I think a lot of you watching do, but we've been talking about 156 the whole time, and God forbid I forget to mention, the 156th prime number is 911. That's, of course, being the date of this massive ritual. 9/11. So there you have it right there. So let's talk about the tarot real quick and how this is incorporated, because the symbolism is right here. Here we have the two towers, or the two pillars, Boaz and Jachin, representing the difference between the masculine and the feminine energy. And notice how this is card number 2, right? And it's, of course, the two pillars that are being represented. Now, what's important to note here is that, notice how she has something in regards to the Torah here. And the Torah is related, or the Torah and the Hebrew alphabet, closely related to tarot. In fact, in Gematria, just want to remind you guys, the word tarot has a value of 74. And this is, of course, what this is all about. It's a Masonic language, which sums to 74. We're speaking English. This Gematria is a Jewish practice. Both Jewish and Gematria have a value of 74. So here we are looking at the two pillars. And this is, again, about the division of the masculine and the feminine energy. The Torah begins with the Hebrew letter bet, which some theorize, well, it does technically mean the word house. And the letter itself kind of looks like a house. It's about the division. And that's where it all begins. The very beginning of the Torah, the first letter, even has its own significance. And if you look at the first card of the tarot, you get the Fool, right? And of course, there's a lot of symbolism to be seen here, and there's a lot of things to look at. Obviously, he's walking off a cliff because he's looking upward, but one of the slightly deeper angles of this is that he's looking away from the sun, and I guess it's obvious, right? And what the sun represents is the point of division. It's the ultimate point of division between nothingness and something, right? That's where it all begins. So the Fool here is completely ignorant of that fact. He's looking into the nothingness and has no light, has no direction. And he doesn't even get a number on his card, just a 0, because he's looking into the nothing. But that brings us to the first numbered card of the tarot, the major arcana, which is the Magician. The Magician, on the other hand, is taking that light from the sun. He's aware of it, he understands it, and he's pointing it down into the earth, thus manifesting the light from the sun down to the plane here on earth. And what's cool about this is that the last card of the tarot deck, the 22nd card, the last card of the major arcana, is the World. And what this all represents is the point of light coming from above, spreading down below. And, I don't have the best understanding of this. I'm just trying to explain it the best to my ability. But I want to point that out, and I think it's important because, again, the Fool, ignorant of the point of division between something and nothing. There has to be something, or there has to be a plane of everything to pull something from. So the word division in Jewish Gematria sums to 911. And I don't believe this is a mistake or a coincidence or anything like that. Because think about where this leads us from the second card of the major arcana, flowing into the third card. Right here, that becomes the Empress. So right away on our journey, we see how the energy gets divided into two pillars. We have the feminine energy here, the divine feminine, and that's followed up by the Emperor, the fourth card, the male energy. So it's that division. And if any of you were fortunate enough to catch the work on Mac Miller, you may recall that divine feminine equals 911. Remember the artist, Mac Miller, who was Jewish? He went out with Ariana Grande, who openly practices the Kabbalah, along with Roseanne and all these other stars who are participating in these media mind control rituals. Well, Mac Miller had an album called Divine Feminine, and the Gematria of Mac Miller Divine Feminine is 1109. How about that? So moving on in the tarot, jumping ahead a little bit, take a look at the 16th card, the Tower. Are you kidding me? Now, I am not at all in the boat. There's some people who have commented on my videos saying 9/11 was a hoax and nobody died. In no way at all do I ever believe that. However, I do believe that perhaps the death toll was exaggerated, or there were parts of the event that were theatrical. And there are, maybe people did jump from the buildings. That makes a lot of sense to me that they would to escape the fire, but it looked like some of those may have also been dummies. And again, I think it might have been a mixture of both. The point is, they had to have that part of the ritual play out as tribute to this part of the tarot here. And as far as this being the 16th card, remember 16 sums to 33 in reduction, one of only two numbers to do so, the other being 90, the number of degrees on the Freemasonic square on the emblem. Remember, eclipse equals 33, but so does the word pillars. Pillars has a gematria value of 33, and that's what this is about, the destruction of the two pillars. And of course, there's so much symbolism here as well. I mean, you have the crown coming off, America, the leader of the free world at the time. That ritual certainly leading to the downfall of America and the modernization of the rest of the world in comparison. So this takes us to the moon, the 18th card. We did skip one there, but we're trying to save some time here. Now, if you look at the diameter of the moon, you get a number that's very, very close to 2160. And if you take 6 times 6 times 6, you get a value of 216. And the moon is constantly represented alongside the number of the beast and evil in biblical numerology. It's the antithesis of the sun. It's the evil. It's the dark side, so to speak. The Death Star. Dark side, Death Star, Certainly Star Wars had the symbolism too. I mean, just look at Star Wars and Gematria, 119. Very representative of the Masonic hidden truths. You'll find more truths in movies probably than the news here in this country. And the rest of the world, of course. So 6 times 6 times 6, you get a number close to the diameter of the moon. And the 18th card of the tarot is the moon, 6 plus 6 plus 6. You get 18, just like the moon, 666, and there stands the moon between two pillars. And then, of course, this takes us to the sun and the Metonic cycle. The sun here is numbered 19. Remember, there's 19 years in the Metonic cycle. The Metonic cycle being a period of 235 lunar phases that syncs up with 19 years. If you add these together, you get 254, the number of sidereal months in the Metonic cycle. The word time, using English extended gematria, this cipher actually built exactly like the Hebrew gematria cipher we've been studying throughout this video. Time has a value of 254. When you write out 19 years, the length of time in the Metonic cycle, it sums to 197. That's the same as Metonic cycle, 197 in the same cipher. Now, 197, I'm just kind of making this connection now. It's the 45th prime number, which is the sum of every number 1 through 9, like the number 19. So 19 years in the cycle. The sun, the 19th card of the tarot. Certainly no mistake. And remember, if we measure from the 1988 eclipse on September 11th to the eclipse on September 11th of 2007, it was exactly 19 years. As far as the date itself, September 11th, the 254th day of the year. Again, a tribute to time and this very Metonic cycle. So I hope this is starting to come together and making a little bit of sense. These numbers are so significant. 156, 33. Also noticed how 666, when we write this out, this has gematria of 156. Same as the phrase triple sixes. It's how our language is built, all of these things being connected. The sun, the moon, eclipses, even false flags built into this language. So let's think again about Freemasonry, right? I mean, we know these are Freemasonic symbols. I mean, even if you look up, just type in Google, right? Boaz and Jacine. So notice how it says, hey, they're sometimes used as symbols in Freemasonry and tarot. Sometimes used as symbols in Freemasonry and tarot, huh? Well, I would say quite frequently, if not all the time. So what we've been talking about a lot lately is these solar eclipses. And I'd like to actually bring this up. Now, a couple weeks ago, I dedicated my podcast to this whole concept. The idea that the states of this nation were actually crafted, they were given their dates of statehood on particular dates. And this is all in relation to the 2017 total solar eclipse. And just to quickly recap, for any of those of you who missed that, The word eclipse equals 33, and the 33rd state is Oregon, whose initials OR sum to 33. In the reverse alphabetic order, Oregon equals 88, which again is the number that represents the passage of time, the sun and moon in the sky. And Oregon has those two O's, like the sun and the moon, the two circles. So the eclipse started in Oregon, the 33rd state. When we write out 33, it sums to 156. So does South Carolina, the state where the eclipse exited at. South Carolina equals 57 in reduction. The word eclipse equals 57 in Hebrew ordinal. Again, that's where the cipher is just numbered 1 through 22. So South Carolina having these alignments. In Jewish Gematria, notice how 8th state equals 433, just like solar eclipse, 433, the 84th prime number. Where the eclipse entered was Lincoln Beach, Oregon. That was the first city that saw totality here in the United States, Lincoln Beach, Oregon, also with a value of 433. The eclipse exited around Raccoon Bay or Raccoon Key. Notice how Raccoon has the same gematria as the word eclipse. The city that was closest here was Awendaw, South Carolina. And notice how it sums to 227, which is the Hebrew gematria of total eclipse. Now, the exact translation in Hebrew, you have to put in full eclipse, but that is the phrase they use when referring to what we call a total eclipse. So it is as relevant. And remember, 22 divided by 7 gives us pi. That's both in gematria, using the standard alphabetic order, and on our calculator, 22 divided by 7, 3.14. It's not exact, but it is the first equation that gives you the first 3 digits of that number. Remember, in Hebrew gematria, something I didn't mention early on in the video, total eclipse equals 227, so does the United States of America in ordinal. So the idea that we are coded around this language from the start, it could be rooted in truth. I mean, it's right there as well. Remember the number of degrees in a circle, 360, also giving us 227. So on the date Oregon was established, Masonry was 141 years old. The word Masonry in English extended sums to 1041. Also notice the date numerology lines up perfectly with Masonry. All of the numbers of Masonry, in fact, appear in the date numerology. And just think about Oregon, how it sums to 74. Talking about this number earlier. Masonic equals 74. Oops. So on the date of the 2017 eclipse that I'm trying to show you guys we were coded around, Oregon was 158 years old, and that's the gematria of Freemasonry in the reverse alphabetic order. Not only that, but it was 6 months and 7 days after its date of admission, and Freemasonry also sums to 67, just like total solar eclipse. In Jewish gematria, the word eclipse equals 192. The state was 1,902 months old. There was also the ritual related to the city of Salem. If you guys want to check my podcast from, I think, just a couple podcasts ago, you'll see I put the eclipse images on the thumbnail. If you want more details on this Salem ritual and how the eclipse went over all these cities named Salem, definitely check that video out. But here was the kicker to me, right? And shout out to Bobby for figuring this wild connection out too, because it was really, really good. Okay, so from the date of the eclipse to the date 2/29/2020, and think about this. This is a leap day, right? This is a significant date because it only it only happens once every 4 years. So 229, leap day. Now 229 is the 50th prime number. The city of Salem equals 50, just like America, just like Circle. There's 50 states, of course, in the Union. And don't forget, our current president is Donald. Donald equals 50. But the state of South Carolina, on the date of the eclipse, remember this was the last state that saw totality in America, South Carolina was 229 years, 2 months, and 29 days old. So you have two 229s in this sequence. Do not tell me this is a coincidence. And then if you measure from the date of the eclipse, this same date, to the date 2/29/2020, it's 922 days. Like the reverse of 229. So again, this calendar is so important to these rituals. These long counts are just remarkably interesting. All right. So now this brings us to the number 1331, the number that I say technically represents a solar eclipse, and I'm going to talk about why. So when I first discovered Gematria, and I created the Excel version of the Gematria calculator, one thing I did is I pumped all dates, all numbers, as they are spelled out, into the calculator, and I looked for interesting patterns, things that stuck out to me. And this stuck out to me like this was one of the craziest things I thought I saw. And this is before I really discovered the significance of these numbers. I made this observation. I noticed that there were 3 numbers that summed to 1331, which is 11 times 11 times 11, or 11 cubed. And think about 11 plus 11 plus 11. That being, 33, the highest degree of Scottish Rite Masonry, which is 33. People equals 33. Each person has 33 vertebrae in their body, and this is what it's all about, ascending the 33 vertebrae from base consciousness through to the crown chakra. So I knew this 1331 was kind of a cool number to begin with, and I noticed 133, when you write it out, equals 1331. And of course, the same letters, 331 equals 1331. There's only one other number that sums to this same value. That would be 393. And why is this interesting? Well, the Metonic cycle in Greek was called Ania as I believe it's pronounced. And Ania equals 393. So this number also connected. In the United States, we have a president, right? President equals 393. But, of course, more interesting is the fact that the 2 numbers that make up 1331 actually sum to 1331. Oops. And what's crazy is that if you take these 2 numbers, 133 and 331, and slowly merge them together, you, of course, get 1331. And this results in an overlap of the 33s. And, of course, remember Eclipse, 33. So let's look at the year 1331. And there's a YouTuber, Lambda115, who I have to get back to watching his videos. I saw he's still making them, and I haven't seen him in a while. But he or someone else, he did the work, I guess, so I'm giving him the credit for now. He noticed that there was only one total solar eclipse in the year 1331, this number that we were picking up on as having some serious significance. And it happened on the date November 30th, and right away I thought this was amazing. Because November 30th is the only date on the calendar that sums to 1331 in Jewish Gematria. And also in Gematria, 1331 eclipse equals 1331. I mean, obviously, we're not looking at coincidence, right? Can we agree on this at least? This is an absolutely extremely significant number, this 1331. And in regards to the 9/11 attacks, some might see this as phrase shopping, but I do find it pretty interesting that considering we have these two eclipses, some people refer to these as the twin eclipses. Twin eclipses, or of course, eclipse twins, equals 1331. And from 2001, the date of the attacks, to the date that these eclipses began, it was 16 years later. 16 years later equals 1331. So this whole idea, this whole 9/11 ritual just seems to be a Masonic thing. And, another thing about this eclipse that I didn't point out, remember solar eclipse 433, this eclipse occurred on the 334th day of the year. But look how it never touches water. I've looked at a lot of eclipses, not all of them, but I've never seen a solar eclipse, a total eclipse, that doesn't go over a large body of water or some sort of sea. So, yeah, this is definitely a big deal. And then check it out, too. If you turn the word eclipse upside down, you get 3 different numbers, 3, 1, 7, and 3. I mean, maybe you can say the S is a 5, but I mean pretty distinctly that you get 3, 1, 7, 3. And this even equals 1331. So look at the eclipse. There was a total solar eclipse that occurred in the year 2001. Just one. And the date was June 21st. June 21st was the summer solstice. Now, the fact that we got a total solar eclipse on the summer solstice is a big deal because that only happens about once every roughly 500 years. Now, what's especially wild about this eclipse, I'm going to have to look this up on Wikipedia for you. Look at what time totality ended. We'll zoom in on this for you and move it over. Totality ended at 1331 UTC. Okay? So that's pretty interesting. But how about this? The spring equinox of 2001 fell at exactly 1331 UTC. Again, this is pretty small, but look it up for yourself. The year 2001, March 20th, the spring equinox occurring at exactly 1331. So how wild is that, right? I mean, how many times are we going to see this number pop up over and over? I'm going to switch to full screen here so you can see. I'm going to bring up my 9/11 presentation. The number 1331 we found just kept popping up over and over. This even goes to Operation Desert Storm, which began 133 months and 10 days before the 9/11 attacks. If you measure from the corner of the 9/11 Memorial in New York City to the corner of the 9/11 Memorial at the Pentagon, you get exactly 331 kilometers. Remember, 331 equals 1331. Notice how the 331st prime number is 2221. And that's the final verse of Revelation. We might get into that in a little bit. But also notice 331, the 67th prime. And in reduction gematria, total solar eclipse, 67. But I did want to touch on one more of the, there's a chunk of 1331s in here. The 9/11 Commission report came out 13 years and 31 days before the Great American Eclipse. We talked about the beginning of the Gulf War earlier. Revelation 13:13 has gematria of 1331. That's using the reverse alphabetic order and, of course, using the Masonic Bible, otherwise known as the King James Bible. All right, so now talking about, once again, how this was a Masonic ritual. Sticking with Jewish gematria here. The ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry has their headquarters in Washington, D.C., and they technically go by ancient and accepted on most of their literature and headstones and whatnot. Well, this is because of the Jewish gematria of 1911. Not only does this have the 9/11 sequence in it, but if you measure from the date of the total solar eclipse in 2017, which this country was coded around on August 21st, if you measure from that date back to the 9/11 attacks, you get 191 months and 10 days, just like the number 1911. Ancient accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, destroying the two towers on the date 9/11, 33 years after groundbreaking, 33 years after 911 was made the emergency dialing code. It's all too obvious, Truth Seeker, when you know what's going on. And, Zach's been doing a lot of work on this lately, too. And I noticed his subscriber count jumped up a lot recently, which is great. Website traffic on gematrinator.com actually is up like 30 to 50% over the past month. I'm not sure what happened, or I don't remember any major false flags. Maybe the Madden shooting had something to do with it. Beats the hell out of me. But certainly a lot of people are jumping aboard the bandwagon and finally waking up to what's going on around here. But what he mentioned is how on the eve of September 11th this year, in fact, the games were still going on while it turned into September 11th on the East Coast, you had the Jets winning and you had the Rams winning. And remember, it was two Jets that rammed into the World Trade Center. I was at a Brewer game back in 2017 on the date September 11th. My brother had a free ticket, so I went along. And in between innings, they played a game that I've never seen before where they had to stack beer cans on top of each other. And whoever stacked them the highest, they won. And usually they play the same games every time we go. Like, keep your eye on the ball under the cap, the crazy cap shuffle. They do trivia. I've never seen a game like this. But at the end of the game, the two guys flew like paper objects into the towers. And they took these things from afar and boom, they crashed them into the towers and they went down. And I was like, am I the only one seeing this? 9/11 people bringing two towers down and everyone's like, oh, Derek, there you go again. You're just crazy. Sorry, guys. No, I got eyes to see, and too many of your people have closed eyelids out there, I'm afraid. So, I hope I've established well enough that this was certainly anything but an Al-Qaeda terrorist attack. I mean, was our language really coded for this? You tell me. Al-Qaeda terrorist attack? Summing to 9/11. These guys were known as jihadists. 9/11. Now the public is divided. Division 9/11. All in relation to Tisha B'Av, the Tisha B'Av rituals. The dates of the destruction of the two temples. All right, so I don't have a whole lot left to cover. I just wanted to establish once and for all, with solid footing, why I think 9/11 was a massive eclipse ritual. I'm glad now I have a video to direct people to when I make that claim. Just to to wrap this up, just to talk about how these rituals are also being concocted in relation to that American eclipse. So you'll see full eclipse has a gematria of 227. We've been talking about this number and how it relates to the circle. Well, in ordinal, it sums to 83. And the phrase solar eclipse, in fact, also summing to 83. It's got the same gematria. Well, if you measure from that total solar eclipse on the summer solstice in 2001 to the date of the attacks, it was a span of 83 days. And this is also 2 months and 22 days, as it commonly is on the calendar. In English gematria, the word eclipse equals 222. So remember the Boston bombings that was on Patriots Day back in the year 2013? Look how long it was to the Great American Total Solar Eclipse. It was exactly 227 weeks and 0 days. Another terrorist ritual centered around the numbers of the eclipse. And remember the guilty party, the Tsarnaev brothers? Look at this, 227, reverse order. What about the miracle on the Hudson, January 15th, 2009, measuring to the total solar eclipse, August 21st? It's 3,104 days. Including the end date, you get the first 4 digits of pi, 3.141. Sully Sullenberger, the pilot of the Miracle on the Hudson, 227. All of these things just, rituals related to pi, the mathematics of the circle. There you have it, guys. So thanks to everybody who jumped into the chat. I really appreciate everyone who hung around and stuck it out. Hopefully you learned something during this video and got a little more insight into the tarot. For those of you who are interested in it, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of knowledge, but maybe this got you going a little bit. This whole code of letters and numbers runs really deep. And if there's anything I've learned from doing this study over the time, and not just paying attention to what's coming out of the media, but paying, some might say, freakishly close attention to the things that are happening in my own life, you realize that creation, reality as it exists, does operate by this code. The people who enter your life on certain dates even, there's something very, very deep going on to this. And really, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, when I first created a YouTube channel, I didn't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I realized that's kind of what I was. I was talking about things that were essentially conspiracies. And while that still holds true, there's a huge conspiratorial element to this because, we're not the first people to figure this out. I think this is occulted knowledge and has been for many, many decades, many, many millennia. Well, maybe a couple millennia anyway. They give us these schools and these religions that just teach us diddly squat. And, I wasn't a very good student. I dropped out of high school. A lot of people don't know that about me, but it's true. I was bored of it. I was rebelling because I wasn't learning anything after a certain amount of time. I just wanted to work and make money and do my own thing. And fortunately, I learned enough programming, and I have a very specialized skill now. So I'm able to use that to leverage my time and get a lot done. So, I like to think about it as paying back to humanity with that extra time to go ahead and show you guys what I've discovered, because, I've never seen anybody look deeply into these ciphers and deeply into the calendar like this. And the deeper you look, the more and more fascinating it is. And once again, I assure you, there's something greater going on. And I don't want you guys to get too crazy with the organic matrix and start decoding every little detail of your life. I don't make decisions based on it. That's one thing I want people to be very clear about. Like, I have this belief that, you have to live out your own free will, and then this synchronicity happens around you. People argue that it's predetermined, that reality is all just, something that we're just playing out. I don't necessarily believe that. I think there is free will to some degree, to a great degree. And these synchronicities we see are a result of that. It's our brains, our consciousness working with the greater consciousness of the earth. We're all individuals, but only to a certain extent. You got to ask yourself, how does consciousness truly operate? When you see a school of fish escaping a shark, how does the entire school of fish know to turn at the exact same millisecond and go in the same thing? It's because once they group together, something else takes effect. And we as humans, we experience this as well, and this is what we experience as synchronicity and things happening together. It's because our minds are connected through our third eye. And, one thing people need to be aware of is how their energy is protected. Remember, energy, this is a word that sums to 74. There's something that we can't overlook, and this is something that is under attack right now. And under many disguises, whether it be Wi-Fi, cell phone towers, smart meters, all of these things emitting dangerous waves. So myself, if I could put a quick plug out to a website, alqaeda.com, where I picked up a couple of pyramids that I sleep next to. And no, I don't get paid by this guy or anything. I'm just saying it's a damn good product. Oops. And it helps me sleep at night. And right away, it helped right off the bat. And what's wild about it, it's like the first night I spent sleeping next to these things, I started to dream again. And how could that be, right? Well, these pyramids have a way of rechanneling or absorbing a lot of these electromagnetic frequencies that are swimming in the air and blocking us, because the third eye in the brain is connected to that extra consciousness of the ether, so to speak. And, we're being attacked by that, by all these waves that are keeping us from it. The same way we're being attacked by fluoride in the water, by GMOs in the food, all of these things calcifying the third eye and keeping us from that spiritual experience that we should all be having here on Earth. So he's got some expensive products too, the radionics. I haven't dived into that yet, but I'm just really happy with these pyramids, and I was able to sleep again. It's really crazy stuff. And this is only going to get worse, guys, with 5G. They're talking about spreading this 5G network out there because, we're not sharing enough videos and pictures and images, right? We need more devices. We need more stuff to do. We need more stuff to share. We need more screens to look at. So that's what we're going to see. All right, guys. I've been up for an hour doing this, so I'm going to take a little break and actually going to wrap this stream up. I'm not certain if I'm going to do a podcast this weekend. I might do it early in the week, like on Monday instead. So I apologize for anybody who really actually looks forward to that. If you do look forward to it that bad, I say find something else to do, right? Or just read my blog posts and imagine my voice in your head spewing out the numbers, because that's all it really is anyway. Once again, thanks to everybody in the chat. I mean, it's funny because in your personal life, this thing can be very isolating. I've been fortunate enough to meet a couple of people who are interested in this work in Gematria and numerology, but the odds of someone close to me or, who's already friends with me getting deep into this to the level that I'm in it, that's just not going to happen, right? I mean, the people who are in the chat, how many people do you know in your life that are heavy, hardcore into this? Probably nobody, if anybody, right? So, to see the chat streaming and just popping up like crazy, even though I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to it and giving you guys the love that I should be, it's encouraging, and I like to think this work is getting out there, and if it's not, then maybe it's just getting to the next bright mind that's going to advance this work beyond what I'm doing, because what we're doing is just scratching the surface. I like to think I'm doing things differently than Zach, and he would probably prefer it that way, right? I hope that somebody takes this research into another direction that is also logical, of course, then I'm able to take it and discover more and maybe get better at making predictions. I definitely have an idea on how to make predictions, but we don't have the data set to run that off of yet. And in fact, when it comes to predictions, guys, it's all about these politicians. And like I've said before, I almost feel like I should stay mum on some of that because it's just too solid. I mean, the evidence is too good. But yeah. All right, I'll make myself bigger here at the end just so you can all see my face and my mug. All right, truth seekers, I really appreciate it. Keep seeking and speaking that truth. God bless each and every one of you. I much appreciate the love, and I'm sending it all right back there out to you. Adios.